In Mark's gospel, Mark relates an incident where Jesus encounters a blind man. And this is what happens. Mark chapter 8, verse 22. They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him, that is to Jesus, a blind man, and begged him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" And the man looked up and said, "I see people, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes, and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. You know, it's interesting. This is one of the few, maybe the only incident where Jesus does a progressive healing. Heals a little bit and then a little bit more. And in the sense of spiritual sight, this is something that often occurs in the life of a believer. Our eyes are opened progressively to the truth of who God is, but it doesn't mean that we should have any less confidence that it is God who is opening our eyes. In the letter that I've been reading over the last couple of days from John Newton about spiritual sight, he talks about the confidence that we should have that the one who began the work of opening our eyes will be faithful to complete that work and give us increasing clarity as to who he is. This is what Newton writes. He says, where the eyes are divinely enlightened, the soul's first views of itself and of the gospel may be confused and indistinct, like him who saw men as it were trees walking. Yet this light, though slight, Newton says, this light is like the dawn, which though weak and faint at its first appearance, shineth more and more unto the perfect day. It is the work of God, and his work is perfect in kind, though progressive in the manner. He will not despise or forsake the day of small things. Our faith, our spiritual sight often begins small, but we shouldn't be discouraged by that. In fact, Newton says this is often the way that God works, as the dawn at the beginning of a perfect day. It starts off small and then progressively fills the whole earth. Newton also says something about this spiritual sight and the grace that is ours in Jesus Christ that was encouraging to me today. He talks about our continual need to come back to God for spiritual encouragement. In other words, he says we can't store it up. It's something that God gives daily so that we're able to recognize that we depend completely and totally on him. He says of the believer that the spiritual sight that we have is inherent to being a believer, but he says the believer has no stock of grace or comfort or strength in himself. Now, when he uses the word stock, he's using the word as like a stock room, like the back room where you keep all your stuff, the warehouse. He's saying that the believer has no warehouse of grace or comfort or strength in himself. It's not like I can store up today's grace for myself in my drawer and then pull it out tomorrow. He says, no, the believer needs continual supplies. And if the Lord withdraws from him, he is as weak and unskillful after he has been long engaged in Christian warfare as he was when he first entered upon it. Now, Newton's not trying to be discouraging here. Be careful, because the Lord might withdraw from you. What he's trying to do is encourage the believer that you must continually, daily go to God for that day's supply of grace. Consider it sort of a just-in-time inventory system of grace. God supplies daily what we need. And then we can be encouraged. Psalm 109 encourages us with these words. David says to God, "You, O God, deal on my behalf for your name's sake, because your steadfast love is good. Deliver me. For I am poor and needy, and my heart is stricken within me. I am gone like a shadow at evening. I am shaken off like a locust." Like a shadow at evening. That's kind of what we feel like in the midst of spiritual discouragement. And that's exactly when we need the dawn of a new day.